Capital Outlay Committee, end of 2020. And 21.
21, almost
Yeah.
22.
Right.
Yeah.
It is Tuesday, November the 16th. It's 4 o'clock. I'd like to just go around the horn, sort of, starting with John. Introduce yourself, John.
Hi, my name's John Jory, Chairman of the Finance Committee in town.
Okay. A new representative appointed by the town administrator. My name is Bob Bosworth, and I live at 10 Sweet Fern Lane with my wife, Amy.
Rich Larius, I'm the chairman, and I've been here a while, so.
My name is Bruce Nightingale. I understand I'm now the vice chairman, and I have been here forever.
And I'm Brian Weiner. I'm the vice chair of Finance Committee, and I'm new.
Okay. I'd like to make some comments before we start in. And Joe, just to, with the new members and sort of catching up of where we were and what we're trying to achieve. It's been a long year and a half for every committee in this town. And we, as the Capital Outlay Committee, have had an enormous number of churn in terms of member. And I'm really happy to have Brian here. And John, you sort of caught the tail end of 20. Yeah. So I think we're ready to do some work. And I just wanted to make some things clear so that we sort of understand the rules of the game before we start playing it. Our job is to develop and to assist the town administrator, Joe Powers, to develop a capital plan. Now, there's been some talk, is this capital plan 5 years or 7 years? And I think there's an old song, "It's not for me to say," back in the 50s. And I think that's exactly where we are right now. It's something that is being discussed by the town administrator and the charter committee, of which I understand that the original charter committee has evaporated and they have new members or moving forward.
If I may, substantially reconstituted with, I think, 2 new members. So there's a substantial representation of folks who were there before.
Okay. Now, what interests us, the older committee before the new members came, was that when something impacts your committee, I think you would think, gee, I'd like to know it changing before I go back into action. Well, this committee, Capital Outlay, was never informed that there was going to be a change to the capital plan. And it's very difficult, and I think difficult as a mindset, to move forward until we totally understand what the rules of the game are. So Joe is getting that cleared up. We had no input, we had no interaction. Okay, so that's where we stand today. I'm sure we'll do well, either 5 or 7. It's just, you know, is first base 70 feet away or is it 75 feet away? We are here to serve and support the town administrator. Bruce and I have worked with, I know I've worked with 4 town administrators. Bruce is either 4 or 5. And they all have their own intricacies, but what they're trying to achieve is the same. And so it's a daily work. The town administrator will develop an amount, or with Carol, the town, not sure, finance director, to come up with what kind of money is available to be spent on capital expenditures. And those capital expenditures are, I think, the same, equal to or greater than $50,000. They are not operating expenses like the finance committee deals with. They are on capital expenditures. We, as the committee, recommend where the money should be spent. The final word, if we vote on it, the final word is Where does it go, and how is it going to be funded? And only one person can recommend that, and that is the town administrator. We are now in November of '21. Normally, the normal cycle is we sort of start meeting in September, but with COVID and stuff, there was a major event, which was the special town meeting. And we did not meet because of a lot of things, COVID and so forth. We've had different kind of meetings virtually, but not in person. And I think the Finance Committee, this committee, and a few other committees, the in-person type of meeting is really critical. The normal cycle is September, October. The department heads are requested to fill out their needs and capital expenditures. You all got a copy of a one-pager, and this is from DOR, correct?
Which one do you have, Mr.
The
Chairman?
one you handed out.
The one you handed.
Thank you, yeah, so that's the form that I'll get to in,
Okay.
shortly, yep.
And this is Joe's form for department heads. Back in the day, that form was 7 to 9 pages and was given to the department heads, sent back. Got a little confusing and so forth. This is the one we're using now. So September and October, the request went out. October, November, the department heads actually came in, sat in that table, and explained to us what they wanted, how they wanted it, and when they wanted it. Every department came in, even the committees came in. November, December, according to the charter, December, we come out with the number. Okay? It's not set in concrete, but it's developed and forwarded to the Board of Selectmen. So they sort of have an idea of what the expenditures are going to be from the capital side. And of course, working with the Finance Committee, they sort of know what the operating budget's going to be and so forth. So January is when that process sort of wraps up and everybody says, yeah, this number's good and now we'll work with this. The number is not set in concrete till town meeting. So we as a committee don't have to meet after January, but if we have ad hoc requests, we'll do it. So I just sort of want to put that together. The times that we do meet during the year, we'll do October, November, December, 2 to 3 times a month, or up to 5 times a month to get it done. And if it means bringing in department heads multiple times, we'll do it. One question that I've had from a lot of people was, do you address CPC? No, we don't touch CPC. You'll get the explanation that it's the bucket effect. I think there's 3 buckets. The 3 buckets and where the money comes out of the buckets. And we can certainly, if we think an expense should be made but is not coming out of as a capital expenditure, but should come out of CPC money, we have in the past gone to their meetings and, spoke in favor of whoever was requesting it. So, excuse me. I said it before, we sort of go from town meeting, May, to September, and that's the hiatus right there. And if we have to meet, we will, to start the new plan. Any questions? The audience? Anything?
What?
Joe? Oh, I'm sorry.
There is one, maybe Joe can expound on that. Last night, we got a budget timeline meeting, tentative one from Joe. By December 6th, the Finance Committee has to post a public hearing on the capital plan. And within 2 weeks, I think we have to approve a capital plan. Is that right, Joe?
So what was presented last night to the Board of Selectmen is the draft budget warrant timeline for this cycle for 2022 annual town meeting in preparation of fiscal year 2023. The reason why it's draft is there are four items that are still open for scheduling. Three of them relate to the education budgets of Cape Cod Regional Technical High School, Monomoy Regional School District, and Monomoy Regional School District line items as required by the agreement. And then the fourth one is, and John would have heard this discussion last night, is returning, Mr. Chairman, as you talk about remote meetings, being able to return to the town's, what I refer to as budget workshop day. The last one we had was Saturday, March 7th, 2020. Carol and I were talking earlier today that we remarked that it did not turn into a super spreader event because less than a week later we were shut down because of COVID. So we're looking to resume that effort. We're not going to be meeting in a room like this. We're going to be meeting in a bigger room. But that will be the day dedicated to the last major discussion of the operating budget and to a lesser degree, some of the other items, if they're lingering on capital and on community preservation. The dates that you were referencing, John, tie back to the charter calls for a hearing, as the chairman's mentioned, with actually the Board of Selectmen and Finance Committee meeting jointly with the Capital Outlay Committee. And so traditionally, it's been scheduled in relation to the Finance Committee. And the charter, for whatever reason, dictates that the Finance Committee must post the hearing. The December 6th date is in concert with the Cape Cod Chronicle, so they only publish on Thursdays. And you have to get your notices in Monday noon before that Thursday. So the first Monday in December by noon would be the deadline. That December 6th deadline is assuming that we would do a hearing in, I think it's the week of the 17th, if I remember correctly. Now, the charter requires that that hearing of the Finance Committee, jointly with the Board of Selectmen, hearing from Capital Outlay, must be done by December 31st, 2021, or December 31st of the year. Many of you will recall that last year we did that in January. And I sought the advice of counsel to say, does this cause any problems? The answer is no. So as the chairman has said, I have been late in getting to this point, and I will point to the special town meeting, as I'll talk about in a moment, because the outcome of that was going to determine what sort of effort we were going to be able to do as Capital Outlay and the town going forward. So the budget warrant timeline will be completed, presented back to the board next week, hopefully, if I can get all those dates tied in. But part of that is you and I having a conversation to make sure the hearing dates that relate to you match up with your meeting schedule and your availability. So we are, this evening's meeting officially kicks off the charter requirement, if you will, related to what Capital Outlay will do in preparation for fiscal year '23, but also, if I could get into it, Mr. Chairman, and also the plan for fiscal years '23 through '27. So I want to stop there, correct. I want to stop there because I recognize that I was answering John's question about a date for a hearing, and I didn't want to go too far yet. But I do have more information on my conversation with the Charter Committee, what that means for this plan and the plan going forward, and then next steps that this committee can take going forward.
Good with that, John?
No, but I guess no, the answer to the question. The December 6th is when I have to post the hearing date, right? And
So that's the date that would have to be published in the Chronicle
for a hearing.
for a hearing that would occur 2 weeks later. Not 2 weeks to the day, but
But that meeting is just Finance Committee looking at the capital plan. It's not with the selectmen, though.
No, it's both.
No, I don't think it's both.
so just, if you're talking about the date of December 6th,
No, there isn't a separate meeting, just the Finance Committee meeting on the capital plan?
my understanding is traditionally no. The charter talks about
Okay.
that the Capital Outlay Committee must present to the board and the Finance Committee.
Okay. I thought that-
It's a three-way prong.
You're right, but I thought it was just a two-way process, but, okay. I must have read it wrong, okay. So I would get with you then to sync up a date with?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
You good?
Yep. Yep. I
You
just wanted
guys
to-
understand what's,
Trying to follow, yep.
Yeah.
okay. It's so that all three arms of the money people understand where the money's gonna be spent,
Sure.
bottom line.
Time is short.
Well,
Well,
that's, yeah.
no, but time is short, but yet there's, I mean, he's run it through, I'm sorry, the town administrator has run it through legal to understand some type of flexibility or understanding of what the charter means in terms of this. I mean,
Correct.
I mean,
And I can speak to the other impediment, well, I apologize. That's not the best word for me to use. It's not an impediment.
obstacle,
Not even an obstacle, actually, I will say. it this way.
opportunity,
Correct.
okay.
An opportunity because the two charter deadlines, and I admitted last night to the board and the public that I have missed a deadline that was in the charter as it relates to the budget process, and so has the Board of Selectmen. And those get to, that the administrator must present a 5-year financial outlook to the Board of Selectmen, and then they rely upon that to develop their budget message, that they then give back to me, that I have to push out throughout the entire enterprise organization.
There
That's
is,
going to occur next Monday.
maybe if you, John and Brian, there is a one-page, we get it every year. It's a one-page broken down into dates, and it runs Mayish, like May through January, of what the goal is with the Board of Selectmen, okay? And, you know, and it's exactly what Joe is saying, but it's easier to read, so you sort of know where you have to be at a certain time. And it's part of, I guess, the charter.
Correct.
That one, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, yep.
That one pager? Yeah, maybe you can have Ellen send it out, or,
Correct.
and it just makes life easy for everybody. So, okay. It's all yours.
All right, thank you. And that is my opening statement. First of all, to the 5 of you present, thank you. To each of you, and I know that Rich and Bob represent my appointees as town administrator, and I'm grateful for both of you for your willingness to serve. Once Bob learns better, we're going to lock him into a 3-year term so he can't escape, because Rich has been here for 57 years, so that's what you can look forward to. And
I get a municipal pension, it's good. Good COLA.
Because Bruce said he was here forever, so I'm not going to quantify that.
I think it's probably close to 16 years.
Wow, yeah. And if memory serves correctly, you are one of 2 who are appointed to represent the Board of Selectmen, so to speak, or,
That's correct.
yep. And then, for the benefit of our newest member, but John and Brian come to us by way of the Finance Committee. And so I say that because I'm grateful that the 5 of you were able to come tonight, because even though there are 6 named members, there is still a vacancy for an appointee to be named by the Board of Selectmen. They are aware of it. They don't presently have any candidates. But the open meeting law dictates that because it is understood, it is comprised of a 7-member body, you have to have 4 members to do any work. And so that's why it is critical to get, hopefully Joe McParland in as a planning board representative, but also that second appointee of the board and the 7th member. But again, thank you for your willingness to serve and for your patience going forward. Your chairman talked earlier about my conversations with the Charter and Bylaw Review Committee. And for those of you that were here last year when we talked about it, I heard loud and clear from present members of Capital Outlay Committee and former members of Capital Outlay Committee. And I did express, as the administrator, my concerns with what occurred 2 years ago at town meeting, but also took actions over the last 2 town meetings to try to remedy some of what happened. Meaning, I'll leave it to others to say what went wrong, or what was perceived to have been wrong with either the capital outlay plan or perhaps some of the professionals that, staff professionals that were hired to manage it. I'll leave that for history and others to talk about. However, the net effect, there are 3 elements that Charter and Bylaw Review Committee at the 2019 annual town meeting meant to accomplish. Unfortunately, given the inartful way that the article was written and the motions were written, they only accomplished one of the three. But the intent was to change the capital outlay plan from 7 years to 5 years. I will tell you that I wholeheartedly endorse that because I'll speak in a moment of my obligation and my predecessor's, plural, obligation under the charter, where the town administrator has always been required to create a 5-year financial outlook. Well, that's the first thing that the charter derives, so it makes sense to dovetail the capital outlay plan with that. 5-year plan also dovetails very nicely with what the Department of Revenue's Division of Local Services recommends, and that's one of the forms you have in front of you, is driven by the DLS, as we call them. It's a best practice. So 5 years is the way to go. Now, they didn't accomplish that with their vote. Their language said that it should be amended to go from 7 to 5 years, but they did not have that in the motion. So when I became acting administrator, I reached out to council and said, the motion of Finance Committee and the statement made to town meeting was that the capital plan would become a 5-year capital plan. And that article passed, I believe, unanimously. So I asked the legal opinion of, is it fair for me to assume, and we'll use that word, that the intent of town meeting was for capital outlay to be a 5-year plan? And council wasn't convinced, so I said, if then the administrator through the Board of Selectmen sponsors an article to amend the charter to say exactly that. And the answer was yes. If town meeting votes to put forward the amendment of the 5-year plan specifically, then we should operate under that understanding. Buoyed by the original vote of town meeting in 2019 and the future action, which was the 2021 annual town meeting. What that means is the voters will be presented next May with a ballot question codifying the 5-year plan. So that's why we're operating under the assumption of a 5-year plan. Town meeting had already voted it. There was an expectation that the voters would have dispatched this years ago, and so we're hopeful that we can move forward on that. I informed the Charter Bylaw Review Committee, and they had no objections. They appreciated that housekeeping effort, if you will. The other two things they were attempting to accomplish was, and Mr. Chairman, you said it, was to define what capital is as far as a threshold. But in that article in 2019, when you go to look at it, they have the statement in further that a capital item shall be $50,000. Well, there are words missing. And I haven't been able to glean from that committee what words are missing, but I can assume, again, their word, that any potential of 3 possible solutions. Not to exceed $50,000, not likely. Not more than $50,000, not likely, or more than $50,000. And I believe it's that last one because that threshold, again, comports with the best practice of DLS. However, presently, the charter says that a capital expenditure is $50,000. So I would never say that we are going to ignore the charter as a rule of law or habit, but we're going to ignore that because that is, doesn't make any sense whatsoever, that it would be exactly $50,000. So I'm operating on the assumption that we're talking about expenditures that exceed $50,000. The other thing that gives me that comfort, if you will, is that there has been a standard articles in years past that specifically said in their titles, capital items $50,000 and less. So they didn't, the Charter Bylaw Review Committee didn't capture that. That effort has not been undertaken yet, but we'll clean that up, potentially starting with this town meeting. The last thing that they had in their effort that prevailed is the most difficult for me in developing a capital outlay plan, presenting to you folks and working with the department heads. And that is that the capital outlay plan adopted by a town meeting cannot be changed, amended, unless there is a 2/3 vote of town meeting. Now, I can tell you as a former moderator that when you're dealing with supermajority votes, so anything greater than a simple majority, that there's a specific reason for that. Now, we know that you can't take money out of stabilization unless you have a 2/3 vote. That's because we know stabilization is our rainy day fund, and we don't want to dip into it willy-nilly, if you will. The special purpose funds that we just created at town meeting are 2/3. But when the state is moving away from some zoning bylaw changes that no longer require a 2/3, to now burden the town of Harwich uniquely with a 2/3 vote to amend is going to make it difficult. Because what that says is, and right now, it is not instructive, meaning what changed does not give any directive or instruction to me. What is an amendment? Are we talking about what is meant for the fiscal year 2023 plan, the specific appropriations that will be voted by town meeting at that town meeting? Is it a future outlier year in the plan? And so it really creates a rigidity to a 5-year plan. I will say the only thing worse would have been rigidity to a 7-year plan. So we, you, I, Carol, town meeting, everybody, are just going to have to trudge along and try to figure out what that means. In the meantime, I've alerted requestors, department heads and committee chairs, that be mindful that when you're presenting your applications for the 2023 to 2027 capital outlay plan, 5-year plan, that you keep that amendment in mind. If you are inclined to keep something off, I don't know that I would do that, because it'll take a supermajority vote at town meeting to put it on. And so those are the things we're struggling with. The good news is we're out of go to meeting and we're in person. But we're still dealing with votes and effects that happened 2 years ago and really never had the time with, quote, normal town meetings to figure out and to test that legislatively.
Joe, I've got a question for you.
Sure.
In the past, we have voted or recommended the expenditures or the cap plan for that year, not the out years.
Correct.
We've gone through a litany of different terms like placeholders and so forth. So does that change? Are we looking at the capital expenditures for '23?
So you ask a great question, and I'm not going to give you a straight answer.
Okay.
And by that I mean to say, you've heard me say earlier, and I'm going to speak in a moment, about the Department of Revenue's Division of Local Services best practices when it comes to capital. And what they talk about, and we don't presently, we use the phrase capital outlay plan. And really, and what the state uses is capital improvement program. The difference between a plan and a program is that a program has 2 elements to it, a plan and a budget. And we don't have that. We have a capital outlay plan. And so I am talking to the Charter Bylaw Review Committee about refining our language to match the best practices. Because I will argue that that vote on fiscal year '23, in this example, is a vote on the capital outlay budget, which is 1/5 a component of the capital outlay plan.
Correct.
And to the chair's question, what do we vote? I would argue that while we vote the plan, we mean plan like the state means budget. And so I'm going to be working towards changing the language going forward so that it's clear that when we talk about outlays for capital, we're talking about funding our capital improvement program. And so this might become the Capital Improvement Committee. And that's to dovetail with the expectations of the Department of Revenue, that when a town, and a capital plan, a capital program is a best practice, along with everything else that we've done and many of the things that we've done with my colleague to my left with financial policies and all the things that Carol has done that lead to our AAA bond rating. Capital program and planning is a smart thing to do, but it's understood by DLS that it's a plan and a budget. And so the budget is what is going to be presented to town meeting under the articles, because that's a vote of appropriation and it's a vote of budgeting. Within the appendices will be the 5-year plan that will show the out years. And so I'm purposely potentially setting up an argument between me as administrator and perhaps the Charter Bylaw Review Committee. what do you mean by amendment? And I would argue that it makes sense that if you want to change what has been posted in the warrant for the present town meeting, and that town meeting, that if they want to change that, it's a supermajority vote.
And you'll walk us through this.
Every step of the way, Mr. Chairman.
Very good.
Yep.
Beyond my pay grade. Thank you.
Wow.
A lot of moving parts. And again, we've endured the fog of pandemic, and we've endured outdoor town meetings, and we've endured not being able to have meetings like this where my voice didn't cut out and my image froze and whatever the case may be. But I remain, as I've tried to be, eternally optimistic that we will, as a town, figure out what the bylaw, there we go, I was about to say it right. Sorry, Sandy Hall, wherever you are. The Bylaw Charter Review Committee, with the actual title, to what they intended to do and to honor that, but also to refine it so that it's workable. And that in going forward, and I've asked this of them, and that going forward, if they intend upon impacting upon any committee or any part of the charter, that they first reach out to administration and the committee or anyone else that they're looking to deal with. And we should all pledge to do that. That's better communication.
Gotcha.
So then, Mr. Chairman, for your purposes tonight, all I really wanted to do beyond getting into a substantive discussion about when and how often you want to meet over the coming weeks, is to just quickly bring you up to speed on the latest form for capital requests. Again, I'm no great author or anything. I stole this directly from the state because they offered it. And this is the recommended format. Now, unfortunately, you're dealing with what I've told folks is an analog copy, because when you look at the digital copy, and I will share that with you folks, a number of these categories have drop-down menus, which is very helpful. In other words, the priority, they have 4 categories of priority. When I say they, I mean the state. And I loved it, because I was contemplating changing the forms that were used before for those very reasons. So of course, you know what the department and committee means: requested by, requested date, project request, and that's really, going to become the name that we refer to it. And you'll see a similar report with all that information. And then it talks about something that we haven't talked about before as a town that I think is going to be helpful, certainly for me and hopefully for Carol and then everybody else going forward. And that is, what sort of asset are we talking about with this capital purchase? And so some of the examples are departmental equipment or machinery. A very straightforward use of that phrase. Building improvements, infrastructure. And so these are great asset categories that roll up to the Department of Revenue. They recognize these words. And there are, if memory serves, there are 7 of them. So it's really going to help us have, a rolled up message that can roll back down of what I always say, words matter. And so these aren't words that I've created. These are words that the Department of Revenue, DLS, recognizes. And it's going to help us when we talk about, because you'll see as one of the things I'm looking at is vehicle replacement. It's a particular, not bone of contention with me, but something that I'm keenly aware of. We will be able to, when I say we, I mean admin staff now, be able to incorporate this into a database. And so if the committee says, can you run us a report and say how many building renovations are we doing? How many equipment machinery purchases are we making? Or the one I'm fond of, how many equipment replacements are we doing? And so we'd be able to capture that because the form captures that. And then right after that, that priority. There are 4 categories of priority. And I've told the department heads as I released this over a month ago, and again, another reason for the delay. I'd rather use this form and take a delay because it's going to bear fruit next spring. The priorities are in numerical order, 1 being the highest, 4 being the lowest. Priority number 1 is legally mandated. And that was a mind-blowing thing for me. What I loved about that is the state saying, hey, wait a second, if you're doing this because you're legally mandated, then that is the top priority. We can't not do this as far as a purchase. Do we do it on capital? That's a different story, how we're going to use the funding. But number 1 being legally mandated tells a story. The next one is the one you see on most of the forms, The second prioritization is essential. And I've told the department heads to use the other free forms that you see on the form there to talk about what makes this purchase essential. Make the case in your form, because when you go before capital outlay, they're gonna ask you that very same question. Why did you choose this as an essential priority? And the answer is because if we don't do this, the program that I do will not be a program. Okay, it's essential to continue the program or the department or whatever the case may be.
Can I ask
The-
you a question,
Go
Mr.
ahead, sure.
Administrator?
Yep.
It's relevant to the context of what you're discussing.
Sure.
So does the town run a capital retirement schedule of any kind so that all the pieces of equipment, we have, I mean, I've seen over the time I've been involved with finance, department heads have asked for replacements based upon need for retirement. Most of them seem to be far beyond their logical usable life. So for anticipatory purposes, does the town administrator or the town run a retirement schedule that would allow this committee, finance, and others to anticipate a reasonable retirement schedule when planning for capital needs?
I'm chomping at the bit to answer that question because it's gonna sound like a setup. We will, and we can, using the program that the state outlines. One of the other things, so what you see here is worksheet number 2 of 5. Worksheet number 3 is schedule of locations. Worksheet number 4 is assets and vehicles. And so I've just gotten the information to populate that, and where it first derives from, and this is an important distinction, is what we get from our insurance carrier. What are the special properties? So think of artwork or other equipment. What are the locations that we have to insure? What are the vehicles that we're insuring? And to your point about a retirement schedule, what the town refers to that as is a surplus disposal schedule. And so I'm excited because, to my knowledge, past administrators have not done that. And because I'm relying upon the best practices of the state, and I know the chairman talked about concluding your work for the most part in January, but I would like to come back to this committee in February so that you can see what will be a full booklet on capital outlay. And it will be all of the applications, it will be the schedule of the appropriations for fiscal year '23, it'll be the plan for '24 through 27, and it will include those schedules. And so that town meeting, first town meeting working backwards can be aware of that. That finance committee, board of selectmen, town administrator, capital outlay can be aware of it. When we have requests for vehicle replacements, and they have to specifically state the vehicle to be replaced, let's look at it on that schedule that we're insuring. Because one of the things that we get from Maya, our insurance carrier, is, in many cases, replacement cost,
So
which
may I
is
ask one-
critical.
May I
Sure.
ask one follow-on question to
Absolutely.
that? Is that all right? Sure. One follow-on, which is, specifically, like, one of the ones that always comes to my mind is even more than vehicles, it's logical capital investments like the roof on the library, for example. I mean, most people know roofs have a very finite usable life. That should be something that can be memorialized, that our entire town would be aware of the fact that the usable life of these assets is coming due, and we are going to need to plan for their retirement. I think if we had a schedule like that, it would be better for all the townspeople and all the committees. And right now, everybody flies blind, and at least as members of finance, we sat there and looked at this very aggressive schedule for things that were logically needed, and yet they were coming out of left field. No one knew about it.
Right.
So my suggestion, at the very least, if not, a predisposition, would be that you, as the administrator, and your colleagues develop a program that could be shared with the town that would say, here's our anticipated needs. I think doing that would make the entire process for all committees much smoother and get approvals much easier.
Absolutely, no argument from me.
Let me,
Sure.
until about 3 years ago, we never had a maintenance manager or whatever,
Facilities manager?
a facilities manager who would be in charge of understanding the life of a building, the life of a roof. This town has not been proactive in anticipating expenses. I'll give you 2 examples. One is the roof that you mentioned. The other was the elevator in the police station, okay? Brand-new police department, brand-new building, elevator shut. No life given to it, okay? And you have policemen fixing this is 2 or 3 years ago, fixing the elevator. So you're 100% right. One thing that we've asked, and I don't think Joe's been around it, but it's been at least the other town administrators, is that I've requested, and almost everyone on this committee has requested, is, are there assets in the town, like the old firehouse, the old school, the old high school, assets that we should consider abandoning? Okay, and I,
Singing John
I-
my song, so
yeah, you may have started this song, but
we've been
I
singing this song.
invented it, okay? And it was invented years ago, and the town doesn't have the appetite. The town doesn't have the appetite to go forward and get rid of things. So we are, I don't, I don't know what the number is for the cultural center, but what does that cost us a year? Just,
To maintain it?
yeah, 100 grand?
I would say it's more
Right.
than that. It's
Okay.
The
probably.
key really is it cash flow
200.
positive or is it cash flow negative?
Well, there's no cash flow
Right.
per se.
Well,
so
but rent's these nickel and dime rents, so it's obviously a very cash flow negative.
yeah, and it also has a very big maintenance schedule.
Right,
in terms of
exactly, so
stuff.
the,
Yeah.
I don't
and-
think people ever get that, though. I don't
Well,
think
we've
they
tried
get
to
it.
explain it, we've tried to explain it, and I think what we were promised, and it's not your administration, what we were promised, and this is something that we could work on after town meeting, whatever, is give us a schedule or give us a list. Make it real simple.
Exactly.
Give us a list of old stuff we're not using. I'm from Jersey. Give me some stuff that we ain't using anymore. Plain English, right? I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you know, you wouldn't pay for a rental property you own, you know, if it wasn't up to snuff. And if it's costing you a lot of money to maintain it, okay, you get rid of it. Pretty simple. You got a car that's not working properly, and you gotta get to work, you get rid of it. So I think that's one thing that I think we need to work with you and whatever.
So our mutual goal seems to be one where we would like to see this process smoother for you and your colleagues.
Yeah.
So that everyone would know on an anticipatory basis what's coming due. That these wouldn't come raging out of left field and flip
Exactly.
everybody out
We
of their
have-
mind.
Exactly.
What we have is we have financial, you have people invested in finance, looking at things and putting a dollar sign, whether it's positive or negative, on something, on an asset. And then you have a group that's counter to this, that has an emotional tie to it. And I'm not saying it's bad to have an emotional tie. I think the two have to get together and say, yeah, you can have it emotionally, we can have it financially, and it'll work that way. But there's some assets that don't work that way, okay? And Carol is the accounting person, you know, we don't depreciate, correct?
We do,
We do depreciate,
we do.
okay. Class assets or an individual building?
Well,
Is this building, the building we're in, has this been depreciated totally?
so generally accepted accounting principles would suggest if you're still using it, you have to extend the useful life,
Okay.
and you have to continue to depreciate the building.
Is that municipal accounting?
Generally
me?
accepted
Is that,
accounting principles.
I know, but is it municipal accounting that you can?
Well, typically, yes, because most businesses, for-profit businesses would replace a building when it's at the end of its useful life, right?
Okay.
So the municipalities are
A little
very
different.
common.
Yeah, okay. So are yours, Joe.
Well, and just to go back to it, I'm excited because what I found is information that I knew I needed. And I was prompted by the forms that the state to add that. Now I'm finding out, not surprisingly, that others have been looking for it. And so we have it, and what I love about it is, it was a simple Excel spreadsheet from Maya that they have, and now we can dump it into that booklet. Because absolutely, everything you said, Brian, about it makes it easier and better, informed decisions. Carol and I have talked about it since the day we started working together. Transparency. And I'm gonna share one more thing. As we get to that omnibus budget meeting in the spring, Carol has, and she's gonna probably nudge me one of these times to say, quit saying it, but Carol creates this amazing, comprehensive budget book that I think gets to just about any question that person could conceive of as it relates to that department, program, or committee. And what I now have the ability to do as the person responsible for capital is to get a smaller version of that, but for that aspect, a full accounting for what do we have? Because you're absolutely right, it's not only procuring for the benefit of moving a program forward, we now have a surplus asset that we can dispose of, that we can get money. And we can do something simple as a municipal website where you say, okay, you know, there's no trade-in value of that trailer. Well, we all know that one person's trash is another person's treasure. And I can tell you from my years in Wellfleet, what we thought we would get no value from, we got $1,000, $1,500, if you will, and in the end, the town brought in just under $100,000 by disposing of surplus assets because we knew of them and because we tracked it.
Can I make
So
one?
that's what I'm excited about this new process.
Just want to put an asterisk, and Brian and John, you sort of know what I'm talking about, but
We have some really, really good employees. We have really, really good department heads. The asterisk is they are not MBAs, okay? And sometimes in the past, we've expected more than they understand to do. And that's our fault, okay? So I think whatever we request of them, that the instruction to get it correct is there, okay? We help them through it. I know from the past, people make very good efforts, they're great employees, but it's beyond their pay grade, what we're asking them to give us the internal rate of return, okay? It's just not fair. So I just put the asterisk there, so when we get the capital request, it may not look like what we want, but in their mind, it's correct, so we work around it.
But there's a standardized usable schedule usable life for most products.
I'm just
And
talking about returns, I'm talking about presentations, I'm talking about what they put on paper. It's, you know, it's the helpfulness that this committee, your committee, can assist them in giving us good information. That's all I mean.
Have you gotten any of these back from the department heads yet?
I have.
Just a few.
He's working on it this weekend.
So, well, this past weekend and coming up.
That's good.
And that's why the agenda tonight is purposefully light, meaning it was great to have the information from the chair. I was hopeful that you take the information I was able to provide on the other stuff going on. And then we end, when the chairman says tonight, by saying, when do we start meeting? And to what the chairman just said as far as staff goes, that's what I've said to staff. I want you to fill out these forms, because the forms, and I'm gonna get to one more of the priority statements of the four, because I've talked about two already. But that's gonna help them fill out the application. And then when you get to the bottom of it, as you see there, and you know, for John and Brian, we haven't talked about it yet, and they haven't done it yet, you know, this is the first iteration of it, but we as a town should be able to articulate that if we acquire this capital asset, here's the effect it's gonna have on the personnel budget. Increase or decrease, or no effect. Here's the impact it's gonna have on the expense budget. So, for example, if we buy a new mower, and you know, we were borrowing one from another town, or we were paying for it, well, there's an upfront cost of, you know, we're gonna pay for this mower, but the next year, we're not gonna spend the $8,000 that we had to on buying something else. And so there's that extrapolation over 6 years or so, if that's the useful life that we're saving money. The point is, this is meant to elicit far more information from the department head or the requestor that they may have been thinking of before. And so the first pass, I want to go back to my department heads and let them know what I've noticed before we then send them to you en masse for your big budget books and to get into that. The third priority, I can't even remember the name, and I said that to department heads because I don't think most people are gonna use it. And the fourth one I can't forget because if they use it, it's not gonna work. I wanna say that the second priority is known as essential. The third priority, I believe, is needed. Sure, wouldn't we all wanna be needed? And then the last one is desirable, which I said, just let me put it out there. If you've got a fiscal year '23 request and your priority is desirable, thanks for playing. We'll see you in a future year.
Yeah.
Back on
And
the
so
bus.
for me, it's really legally mandated is its own class. Is this essential? And then tell us why in the document. And then as you can see, it goes on there. The other thing I loved about it, middle of the page, yes, I just said I loved a form. Bob, you know the sickness I've had for years, right? So if you look at that form in the middle of it, funding request by year. I'm not gonna lie to you folks. When I read that, I thought, how am I gonna change those headers to be fiscal year '23, fiscal year '24? And then light dawned on me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, first year of the plan, second year of the plan. And that's what I love about it, is this one form could replace, multiple forms, but it's also showing us, like, one of the department heads, and they will remain nameless because they're giving it their best effort, and this, again, is their first pass at these forms. But when you look at estimated project cost, they put the dollar amount that then appeared in year 1. Normally, that'd be correct, except that years 2 through 5 also had costs. So the estimated project cost gets to the 5-year life of that. So if you have 5 years' worth, the first thing we're gonna see is what is the total cost over the 5 years. Now, you see that in the spreadsheet, but when you see that in the form, it hits you in the face, first of all, and I think that's appropriate. That heads up, we're talking about 5 years' worth of. So estimated project cost, then request by year, and then as I talked about, there's free-form things, but at the end, start talking about how the estimated dollar impact on this purchase or project on your operating budget as it relates to personnel and expenses. I think that's a great question to ask. And as we use this over the years, that's gonna be far more helpful, and it's gonna be completely populated. Because as we get more adept at this, and as we get more information, the expectation for the requesters is going to be, understand the effect that your request is going to have. Not just in the 5 years, but how is it now go back to the 5-year outlook? Because that's, that gets to 3 years, but that's the other part of it. I talked about the financial outlook overall. I've already told the board that when I do my financial outlook, my 5-year plan, obviously I'm gonna do capital. I'm also gonna do operating budget for 5 years, and we have narratives from the department heads. And then I'm adding community preservation, because even though it has a capital aspect to it, and as the chair said, completely separate entity that deals with that, the town meeting member, as I like to call them, should know the full concept. This is where we see impacts on operating personnel costs and expense costs. This is what we see coming out of capital, and this is what we see coming out of community preservation. Because when you just look at the operating budget, you have roughly, and I'll ask Carol not to respond because I'm doing percentages and she's the math person, but if we say that our operating budget roughly gets to, say, 50 or 50-something% of the overall budget, well, that's not the whole story. That's the operating budget, whereas the capital budget and all the other costs that go with it. And the overall intent on all of this is not only the financial outlook for the board, but these forms in this program is to give more information for the decision makers, or the advisors in this case, so that town meeting has the information, that we can all say that if nothing else, we had information to make informed decisions. And to me, that should be the ultimate goal. That when we went to town meeting, we had the information. And then the rest of it is to the strength of the arguments. Believe it or not, I'm done.
Okay. Carol, would you like to?
Well said.
You're good? Any questions?
Just a quick question on the personnel expense, Joe. Is that, it seems like it's awful subjective there, that the department head could, how are they basing their numbers on that?
So the example that I use, and again, it may not work for the first pass, and it may not work for all of the requests, but if you, I was gonna use an example, but I don't want to because it's real life and I don't want to suggest that we could have done that. I use the example in staff of, say we have an opportunity to use a drone.
A drone?
A drone.
Okay.
That we have a drone and it's going to do delivery of our mail. You know, that instead of coming to town hall and employees have to come here, we're gonna use this drone and they're gonna go to all the locations to drop off the mail. Well, if we don't have to have a person doing that anymore, that's the personnel savings. If the drone can do cheaper what personnel costs were, if we have a capital asset that's gonna let us do something cheaper, faster, smarter, well, it has to have a correlation to either a personnel expense because a person was doing it, or an expense because a contractor was doing it, or some other piece of equipment was doing it. So that's what's meant by that one. And to me, again, I didn't make this stuff up. It comports with best financial practices that the state puts out there. And so there has to get to that elevated level of thinking down the line. If we invest in this capital, what is the net effect on those other line items? We may not get there in the first year, but,
I think it's a work in progress there.
yep, but to me, it elevates the level of how we're,
Yeah, I was
of
just
our
curious on it.
discourse. Yep,
Because you can say, you know, we're gonna buy a backhoe, and then we only have to have 5 people dig a hole, you know, it'll save on 5 people. But,
Yep.
yeah, so, okay. Well, no, it's a good, I think it's great.
I have one question.
Sure.
And this might not be relevant, but just wondering, did the town receive any money from the federal government for COVID out of the CARES Act? And does that factor into any of the budget planning and perhaps capital outlay stuff? That's a loaded
it's a
question.
great question, Bob. And a good question, but there's a lot of components to it.
There are components to it. The town has received multiple opportunities for funding through FEMA, through the CARES Act funds, through some funds that came through Barnstable County. We capitalized on as much as we could. There's certain restrictions on those funds and how those could be spent. So the CARES Act funds expired, or we closed that per the direction of the Department of Revenue on October 29th. We're still applying projects to FEMA for FEMA funding. And then we have ARPA funds now. The town of Harwich was allocated just under $1.3 million in ARPA funds. We've received half of that. There's those spending, I guess, categories are also pretty stringent. So we're working with legal counsel on the most appropriate use for those funds. And then now we have the infrastructure funds that are going to be coming out, and I understand most of that is going to be pretty competitive. And so as more details come forward on the infrastructure funds, where, you know, I think the Board of Selectmen will make decisions of how they would like to use all the ARPA funds and the other funds, because the categories are somewhat broader and has like broadband and water and wastewater infrastructure and things of that nature, which, as we all know, in Harwich would be a welcome gift. Correct.
Thank you.
And if I can add on to that, for the benefit of, you know, a member of Capital asking that, I don't know that we have the comfort level yet to rely upon those as a funding source for our capital plan.
Yeah.
And so, and I suppose that's a good news thing, but I will tell you that I don't like the word because I don't know that it conveys the positive aspect of it, but Carol and I tend to have a more conservative approach, and so I'd rather assume it's not there and build the plan on the sources that we know that have been stable and available, and then if we get surprised down the road, we'll figure out a way to use it. But it's a great question, it's a timely question, but I do want the committee to know that I'm presently not relying upon that to any significant degree at this time.
I sort of have a catch-all, bring it all together, kumbaya kind of question. I mentioned before that we're the finance people, not finance committee, but just financially targeted. And we look at numbers that are really big, okay? And from a Harwich resident walking Main Street and stopping you and saying, how much are you spending, kind of thing. Is there any way or anywhere we can sort of justify the means, justify what we're spending, okay? To understanding that we have homeowners that rent their homes during the summer and live in a trailer because they can't pay their taxes, or just don't have enough to live on, and yet they live in a town that is fairly, I don't want to say rich, but we're okay. Is there any spokesman, or is there anything that anyone has considered that takes in this, this understanding that we have a revenue stream and we're spending this money and we're going to put a roof on and we're going to change the doors and we're going to do windows, and yet we have elderly that really need help? And is there any way to direct some money or some of that cash to efforts to help them? I'm just looking at it.
Sure, and a simple answer, that starts with me. And when I discovered that, and I've said it to my colleague and our finance director, I was a little bit surprised, but when you read the charter, it's the town administrator who was tasked with creating a comprehensive budget message and then a comprehensive budget to go with that. And so when I learned that truth, I put that on my whiteboard in my office. Any of you that come in, I always point to it, and right above it is the tote, if you will, that tells me how many days till town meeting, 167, because the number of days till town meeting is critical, because it gets to the comprehensive enterprise-wide budget, it gets to our bylaws that we change at town meeting, and it gets to life here in Harwich. And so I say that it starts with me, and it starts with me in presenting to you folks on the Capitol. To Bob's question about ARPA funds and other things like that, you've already heard me say the things that I'm thinking about. Well, I know my Board of Selectmen and how they have created past budget messages. And they have said, do not rely upon overrides, and to a lesser degree, debt exclusions. And so I understand that to be that if there's a critical capital component, we may rely upon a debt exclusion as part of that process. But Proposition 2.5 overrides, generally speaking, we don't look at that, because we're mindful of that in a community that has exquisite skyline and gorgeous houses, also has people that live here year-round, day in and day out, that are trying to live life the best that they can, with the expenses that get higher once you get over a bridge, and are living house rich, cash poor. And so as we get into the capital plan, to bring it back to you folks specifically, one of the things that I was just talking to Carol about this earlier today that gives me relief is that you're going to hear about capital items related to Channel 18. And there's a dedicated source for that. The public access education grant that's funded by Comcast. And so we have that bucket of money available, and we use it for our meeting rooms and all that, and we do not impact upon the tax levy for that. We have other grants that are available. So because we're mindful of the average person, and I'll believe it, and I'll put myself in that equation, even though I'm very fortunate to have a very well-paying job on the Cape, but I've got expenses and kids and mortgage as well that we try not to impact upon taxes as much as we can avoid that. But in the end, I've always said, and I will always say, that a budget is meant to be a town's statement of its priorities and its belief system. So we should be funding those programs that help those in need, and those programs that support seniors, or that impact upon health care because of a pandemic. And so in the end, every day is spent with an eye towards town meeting, because town meeting is the last one to talk about that. that you said, Mr. Chairman, to verify where the priorities should be, to affirm the budget, and then to send us on our way about a month and a half later for July 1st to get it done.
Yeah, thank you.
But it starts with me.
I think that message has to be said. You know, I just think it has to be said. I don't think it's been voiced at a town meeting that the thought process of every committee there, or whatever, has taken this into consideration and has tried to assist in the success, or whatever. So
I
it's
think it's a great point.
just something. Okay,
Rich?
Yes.
I have a hard stop at 5:30, so,
congratulations.
okay, so, I mean,
Good.
a prior,
Good.
if you wanted
Pick
to
me up
vote
at
on,
McDonald's on the way out.
you want to vote on something or something.
No, there's no vote. The question, there's a vote in terms of, let's look at the calendar and what's our next move,
Yeah.
okay? That's,
It's my understanding that traditionally Tuesday afternoons, evenings work for you folks, is that?
well, how does it work for you guys?
I'm very flexible.
I mean, you're retired, I'm
Yeah.
retired, you're retired. Brian, are you retired?
I still work.
Okay, so
So,
I
but I
lost
can
my
do a
job.
4 o'clock meeting at any
you can
time.
do fours.
Oh, yeah.
Can you do fours?
I'll do my best. I don't want to upset the whole apple cart here
Oh, you're
and
not.
change the day just for
No,
me.
no.
I'm on deadline for my newspaper on Tuesdays, but
Oh.
I'm also in charge of the paper, and if I can get it done early and I can scoot out of there, I will do that. So leave it for Tuesday. If there's a Wednesday, I can
Well,
definitely do Wednesdays.
let's look at it this way. We'll go week by week and
Okay.
see what they're,
Absolutely.
do we have to meet next week?
So I would ask that you not. Next week is the short week, and really November 29th, that week is when I should have all of the applications in by tomorrow. It gives me the time between now and then to get a copious amount of information to you folks. And then perhaps, I think for the first meeting, Mr. Chairman, I can probably give you a better sense of what I've reported to the board and what we are looking at for available funding sources.
Okay, so does the 30th work? Does the 30th work?
That's a
I'm
Wednesday.
getting a knee replacement on the 29th, hopefully, so.
Wheel you in, man. I got a wheelchair in my garage. Just,
This is twice it's been canceled on me, so the answer is probably
30th work?
no.
Sure, is that a Wednesday?
it's a Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay, yeah,
Or you
sure.
want to do Wednesday?
No, let's do Tuesday.
Okay, how about the 30th? We're not going to be voting on anything. We're going to be listening thing, and we'll have 4 out of 6, 4 out of 7 still quorum.
And it's gonna be 4 PM?
Well, that was my next question, if a later hour helps some of the working members. And I can tell you that, we need to get out of here for a 6:30 Board of Health, but we can also have other rooms available.
Yeah.
Such as the small committee room.
Does an extra hour give you?
Let's do 4, just in case we run long.
Okay.
Okay?
You can come anytime if there's a vote, it's
Okay.
at the end.
Bob
How's that?
knows when I'm at a meeting, it's gonna run long, so he knows what he's talking about.
Can we Skype him in? Is that legal these days? I don't know.
That's all right.
You don't want to, you're going to be, the last thing you want to worry about.
No, we talked about that last night at the selectmen's meeting, remote participation.
Okay.
What's the word? Is it no?
It requires a vote of the board, and,
Board of Selectmen.
correct. Board of
Sorry
Selectmen
about
has
that
to
meeting, but
authorize.
how about, oh, they have to authorize this?
They have to authorize a
Case by
member of a
case.
committee to.
Brian, do you think you'd be able to make it?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Okay, so we got 4,
I'll be
okay?
here.
And we'll get it to the point where we'll be fine.
Yeah, the
Okay, we
30th
have
at 4
to-
PM, I'll
Initially,
absolutely
we
be
have to pick a date so we
Yeah.
can get things done.
Do you need another date after that? You want to schedule one more after that?
Let's see how much we get done on the
Okay,
30th.
so I'll
How's
be,
that?
that's not a problem
And
for
you
me.
can figure one more before Christmas. Fair enough?
Sure.
Yep, that'll work for me.
Does that buy you enough time, buy us enough
Yes,
time?
absolutely.
Okay, so we'll do one more the last week of November,
Okay.
and then something the week of the 14th or something like that, or the 14th. Fair enough?
Sure. My expectation is that what I will be giving to you in advance of your meeting on the 30th is the proposed capital outlay plan, the applications for
Great.
fiscal year 23 through 27, and all of that backup material that we've talked about, so that first of all, you can see the numbers that we're looking at, and then start scheduling those discussions you want to have with those requestors to get more refinement, so that eventually the Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen can have their presentation from the capital outlay and continue on the process.
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you give us a little hint? How do those look so far?
So what I've noticed, I said to Carol, well, let me back up. Last year, we ended last year with a number of things that we had pushed off. Now, what I've asked the department heads is to restate their earlier requests, even though if it was, carried over, and any new requests, because this is a new plan. And we went from 29 million, I was able to lop off 14.5 million right away, because we're not doing DHY.
Right.
And so we're under 10 million.
That's
I
nothing.
think we're gonna come in certainly under 4 million, but I don't know that
Okay.
yet. And then, as I've seen, and you folks probably know this better than I, then the out years tend to get a little bigger. So I want to just have that conversation with department heads, reminding them, that in those out years, if that pressure is there to amend the plan, is a 2/3 vote. And so I need them to be really considerate of, don't push your bigger numbers to the outlying years, thinking that we can keep pushing them out. Because I don't believe we can do that under the charter requirements.
I know that this request plan will have out years. We've had years where they have not submitted anything in out years. So I don't know, they've looked at the year,
Yep.
first year, and that first year is the year in the past that the approval takes place on, okay? So
Like I said, I will continue to have those discussions with bylaw charter review.
Yeah, okay. So we're good?
Good.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Third, whatever. Wait a minute. Order. Hey.
But when you're done,
Thanks, guys.
Good luck to you, Nate.
Thank you.
Which one,
Thank
left or right?
The right one, and then in January, this